Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler, and it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, 8 local cities grapple with losing roughly half their funding if voters approve a statewide property tax cut. Nassau County pauses data center construction even as the celebrated attorney shines a light on the growing controversy. We'll be looking at Erin Brockovich's new database. A local principal gets national attention after she's fired over a rap lyric in the school yearbook, and concerns that a bill could silence citizen input again sidelines legislation that would address the missing middle housing in Jacksonville. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by Jack Webb, attorney and former city council president. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
Jake Stofan, city and state government reporter at Action News Jax. Hi, Jake.
Good morning.
Noah Hertz, St. Johns County reporter at Jacksonville Today. Good morning, Noah.
Morning, Ann.
And Obi Umunna, attorney and political consultant. Hi, Obi.
Hello.
So I want to start with the topic of property taxes, because this is one that is just starting to be reckoned with. It obviously would go before voters in November, but has massive implications here, there, and everywhere. I want to talk about it from a political standpoint. I want to talk about it from an economic standpoint. Jake, this is something that you have been breaking down for some time now, really, kind of looking at the various budget challenges that local governments and county governments are facing. What are we hearing right now when it comes to just Jacksonville, the county, and the city itself?
I think the best sort of analysis of the impact has been done by the Florida Association of Counties, because it factors in the cap on, property tax increases for non-homesteaded properties as well, whereas the city auditors have really just kind of looked at the increased homestead exemption and the impact it would have. So once you hit that $250,000 homestead exemption starting in fiscal year 2028, the city of Jacksonville is looking at really almost $400 million being taken out of the budget in lost revenue. The mayor is basically saying that's about a third of the budget. She's obviously come out against it very publicly yesterday. I think one of the big questions in terms of what is the immediate impact going to be, it's going to be looking at this budget cycle, because we're already starting to see a difference of opinions. The mayor says, she doesn't necessarily think that they need to start making cuts this year in anticipation of this possibly passing in November. The budget's got to be done before October 1st, whereas you're hearing some city council members say, hey, we're looking at like a 15% reduction in revenues starting in fiscal year 2027. So next October, we need to start winding things back, assuming that voters may approve this. Whether they do, that's obviously the big question.
Sure. I mean, it would take a 60% supermajority of voters to approve it, but essentially it would raise the current homestead exemption from $50,000 to $150,000 and then to $250,000 for the 28-29 budget. So that is a big chunk of change that would be lost. Mm-hmm. Jack, as a former city council president, I mean, this is a budget, as Jake says, that this council is saying they want a lean budget from this mayor. They want to start building up reserves because of this but it is also a council that has been in a sort of contrary position to some of the mayor's spending priorities in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
have looked for reasons and ways to cut back on some of her priorities.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see this current budget cycle going because of the concerns about this future potential tax cut?
I think it's going to be pretty austere. I think the political ramifications are going to begin immediately, as Jake was saying, because we don't know what it's going to look like. So I think there's going to be a big push to build up as much reserve as you possibly can. But a hit of that magnitude, I mean, you're not going to do that in one anticipatory budget cycle. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have to look to long-term structural changes. It's funny, when this story broke, first thing I thought of Yogi Berra's famous quote, "Deja vu all over again." This was the same thing we dealt with back in 2007. So I'm sure Mayor Deegan is having a lot of conversations with former Mayor John Payton as to how to navigate through this thing. and it's and I will say I support the governor in wanting to overhaul the ad valorem tax system. I mean, I get it, but you can't starve the beast, as Rory Diamond said. You've got to fund municipal government. But this is not fixing Florida. This is not fixing property taxes in the state of Florida. This is making an already inequitable system more inequitable. You've got to do a comprehensive study as to how to fund local government in the absence of ad valorem property taxation. And they have not done that. The legislature just ran this thing through. So I'll leave it at that.
I mean, you mentioned the previous cycle, the last time the voters in the state were asked to expand the standard homestead exemption. And that was the last time was in 2008. So that raised it from 25,000 to 50,000, which is significant at the time. And, of course, there were also limits placed on what local governments could do in terms of additional fees and revenues, constrained that. Noah, you've been covering this from a St. Johns County perspective.
Yeah.
St. Johns County is less lean than Duval County by a lot. I think it's, the amount that it collects per capita, several $100s more annually per person than Duval County. Some would say that the services and the amenities that the county has reflect that.
It's been interesting in St. John's because, again, I think what has been especially interesting for me with this issue is that it's one that kind of cuts across political lines. It has a lot more to do with your proximity and relationship to a local government, to your municipal government, than it does political lines. There was some discussion earlier this week at the county commission meeting with, again, the St. Johns County Commission is entirely Republicans. It is an overwhelmingly red county, and still some of the most staunch Republicans on the county commission are saying this will result in a huge loss of revenue for us that will seriously impact services that people receive. That said, though, the story that we ran on Jax today, that my colleague Mike wrote about Jacksonville, received something like over 1,000 comments on Facebook. The story that I wrote about St. John's received more than 500. And I would say the overwhelming majority of those are people who are saying things like, what services do we receive? And I'm going to vote for this. And I think a lot of this really does come down to, to Jack's point about having some people saying you have to fund this, people not necessarily being fully aware of everything that government, that ad valorem taxes, that the government funds and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that people are ignorant. I'm just saying that local governments could maybe do a better job of illustrating all of the things that they do pay for with these taxes. And I think that's going to be a big effort in the next 6 or so months.
Part of me thinks, Obi, that those messages have to be a lot more specific, because we sort of hear about, well, it pays for services, it pays for parks. I think when you start to tell people, the kittens and the puppies at the animal care and control are not going to get like their kibble, then people start to be like, well, wait a second, that's kind of something I do care about. But politically, I want to ask you, where the lines are. This is a overwhelmingly Republican legislature, Republican governor, but there are a lot of concerns, even those who voted to put this before voters, saying this is not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always two different tracks on issues like this. When you're putting stuff in front of the voters, you're saying, hey, the voters are going to decide. And I think that's one of the things that I think just happens in general is people are more willing to put something in front of the voters. The problem in this particular case is I think people have to have an honest conversation about what this looks like if this gets passed. And I don't think we've had that yet, and it's been rushed through. I think police, fire, roads, all of those things, public works, all of those things are going to be affected when you lose a third of your budget. And so I think that conversation really needs to be had, and it hasn't been had because of how quick it's been rushed through.
But we haven't yet heard from some major players, whether it's like the Association of Sheriffs, the Florida Chamber of Commerce. I mean, there are some big and powerful lobbyist groups, the business groups, associated industries. There are going to be some voices that will weigh in on this debate. But practically speaking, it is pretty hard to defeat a property tax cut proposal before voters. The last time it went before voters, it was 73% approval.
Yeah, I mean, I think the level here, the amount of this raise is going to draw some eyes. I think it's one of those things that it's going to be tough at the ballot unless there's a very conservative effort to defeat it. but I think this is one of the messages is a little bit too much too soon, right? There's a difference between $25,000 raise and a $200,000 raise, and what it's going to do to kind of your city services and budget. And I think that first one didn't have mayors kind of coming out in the same manner as this one is, because I think every major mayor has come out against this particularly. So we'll see what the effort is to defeat it will be. It does have to do 60%, which has been a little bit more troublesome over the last kind of election cycles. But
I want to correct myself too. I said it passed by 73%. It passed by 64%.
Right.
And Duval County opposed it, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
Jake, I want to ask you, because you've been reporting on the situation of what are called fiscally constrained counties. This is actually a specific designation for 29 counties in the state. And basically, they have such a small tax base that they are unable to collect, in many ways, even now, unable to collect enough taxes because each of these counties has to run certain services. Tell us what they're obligated to be paying for, and a little bit about the history of why we have so many counties in the first place, because that's something that you've also reported on.
Well, yeah, this goes to the conversation I had with Wyman Duggan when session was first getting started. Because he's the only person I've heard who, he's a state representative from Jacksonville, but he's the only person I've heard suggest maybe we have too many counties, Maybe we start consolidating counties.
We have 67.
And he argues that counties, unlike other types of, like Duval, there's a couple counties that are actually specified in the state constitution, but most of them are just in statute. So theoretically, lawmakers could just start deleting counties and consolidating them if they so chose. And perhaps that would be a way of alleviating some of the burden on these fiscally constrained counties that are already, having a tough time making ends meet if something like this were to pass, because, they're, in terms of the raw numbers, they're not necessarily going to lose that much, but in terms of the percentage of their budget, it's way more significant than even in a place like Duval County. And the reason why we do have all these counties is back in the day, if I remember correctly, every single county was guaranteed a seat in the state house. So back during the Jim Crow era, and there was, an effort to sort of pad the legislature, they started creating a whole bunch of counties over a pretty short period of time to make sure that, back then, I guess the Dixiecrats were able to remain in control. Do we need a Franklin County or a Union County or a Putnam County? Maybe there's more of an argument for Putnam County, but it could theoretically be a workaround, or you kind of pull the resources together.
There are 5 local counties that are on this list of fiscally constrained: Baker, Union, Putnam, as you mentioned, Bradford, and Columbia. And so to make a comparison, Jack, basically 1 mil, which is like $1 for every $1,000 worth of a property value, a 1 mil in one of these fiscally constrained counties raises $5 million. In a county like Palm Beach County, 1 mil raises $290 million. Wow. So you can see when it comes to paying for basic services, you're a lot better set in a county that is generating that level of income.
That's a really good point. And I was looking at, again, even the way the legislature and the governor have proposed this thing, the exemption is uniform across the state, despite the fact that this goes to your point. Not what plays in Palm Beach County might be feasible, might not play in Union County. But again, the homestead exemption is uniform across the state, regardless of the property values that might exist in different counties. But going back to what Obi was saying, by the way, that Wyman's got a pretty good idea. I think that's not a bad idea.
I haven't heard anybody else endorse it, but I thought it was interesting.
Jack is endorsing it right now.
Wyman,
but try to convince the Union County sheriff that he's got to become part of JSO.
Yeah.
So.
But you talk about this thing passing, and I had totally forgotten that Duval did not support the last initiative when it came down. But you got Blazing Golia out there, the state CFO, who's blasting against big government, and this thing is being captioned as "Save Our Homes from Excessive Property Taxes." You walk into the voting room and whatever, you see that, oh yeah, I'm going to vote for that. So
I will say one thing, and especially to the consolidation of counties. I do think here as well, and there is a level here where this is trying to remove a little bit of local control, right? I think it is making Tallahassee kind of, you have to come to them for your funding. You have to come to them for every piece of kind of what you need to do. And I do think, while I think the initial reason why we created counties could be problematic, I think what it does allow people is to have local control. If you don't like what the taxes are in your county, you can get rid of all the people that are elected.
Sure.
And I think now what is happening is the buck is being forced to be, you have to go to Tallahassee to get all your funding, as opposed to being able to have some local control over that. And I think that's also problematic. And I think that is why I think people should probably vote against this, is you are losing local control of your own funding, particularly in some of those counties, but even in the bigger counties, because of how strapped they're going to be, they're going to have to go to Tallahassee for stuff.
I want to note that there was a recent editorial written by Jeff Brandes, who's a former state senator. He now runs the Florida Policy Project. And he said he called it the property tax blast radius that nobody's talking about. And he says everyone's talking about property taxes, but almost nobody is talking about power. That's strange, because power, not taxes, is what this debate is really about. He says if you have to go to Tallahassee hat in hand to fund your police and firefighters, at that point, who's really running government?
Right.
The answer is not your county commission or your county council. The answer, Noah, he says, is whoever controls the money.
Well, and this is what I'm wondering is whether at the end of the day, there are a substantial enough number of Floridians who don't really care about that, as long as they are able to slice a pretty significant amount of money off of their, annual expenses. The state created a website where you can input your address, and then it will pull it and tell you how much money you would save by the time the $250,000 exemptions are put in. And I threw in a couple addresses for my wife's parents' house and a couple places like that. And I think for a lot of people, I've seen the argument made, especially for people living on fixed incomes, being able to save $1,000, $2,000 more if you live in St. Johns County, some money every month, I think that could really make or break it for people.
Yeah.
And I think, especially covering St. Johns County, that's been top of mind for me has been I guess I wouldn't say demographic shift, but definitely the influx of people who have come into the area in the last 5-10 years. And I wonder if somebody who, the massive amount of people who moved from states like California or New York over the course of the last 5-6 years to Florida are going to look at this and go, this is what I signed up for when I moved to Florida. This is an extension of what I signed up for when I moved to Florida. And I don't really care if it means my county has to be a little more cash strapped, if it means my bottom line looks different.
Or if they're not that tapped into who's running their government in the first place, whether ceding that power to another authority matters to them.
I think a lot of people will just say, who cares?
I'm talking about the week's headlines with four excellent folks here today. We're talking to Obi Umunna, Jack Webb, Jake Stofan, and Noah Hertz about the week's headlines. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can reach us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We have got an email from Angela. She says, can you please explain how this proposal is a shift of the tax burden from wealthier residents to lower wage earners? And then a follow-up on that. Well, let's start with that. I mean, Jake, is this, how might local governments make up for the loss of property taxes? I mean, I think that's sort of the eventual conversation. If you can't pay to mow your lawns or maintain your parks, that money's going to have to come from somewhere. And so what do local governments do, or what does the state do to raise those funds?
I mean, I guess some people would argue it doesn't have to come from somewhere, the government's spending too much, but let's be real. I mean, is city council or the mayor anywhere going to let go of that amount of money and just shut down everything that they can't fund anymore? So, I mean, what are the options available? Maybe a sales tax. They'll still be able to
precluded from doing that. Yeah.
Even if they go on a referendum or something.
You'd have to get dispensation from the legislature to do a referendum on that.
Yeah. So, fees, the
Fees.
garbage fee, you raise the garbage fee. Yeah. Do you continue to, raise non-homesteaded property taxes, to the highest degree? That could impact renters, who are not the owners of those, apartment complexes or whatever are not going to reap the benefits of the homestead exemption. So, you just start seeing costs passed along and picked up in other places. Like at the end of the day, are you going to have more money in your wallet, even as a homeowner, than you would have otherwise, or are you just going to be paying it somewhere else? And I mean, I guess it's really up to the individual municipalities and counties to decide if they're going to do that and how they would do it.
We're getting a lot of calls. I want to try to get to some of them. Howard and Mandarin, go ahead, please.
Hey, this is Howard Royce from Mandarin talking to Jack Webb. Jack, back before 1980, we had the homestead exemption was $5,000. In 1980, we passed it to be $25,000. It really hasn't changed except for in Duval County that we get an additional $25,000. The question that I have is why is there so much opposition to increasing the homestead exemption when it's the current homestead exemption has essentially not changed for 46 years and it's not tied to inflation? Jack, your comment.
My comment is that it takes 60% of the properties off the tax roll. Okay, that's great. No one wants to pay property. Howard, by the way, good to hear you. Good to hear from you. But the bottom line is it takes 60% of the properties off the tax roll. That means 60% of the people are not paying for services.
We've got a call from Mike in St. Johns County. Good morning, Mike. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I live here in St. Johns County, and, the problem has been here, this uncontrolled growth that a lot of us don't want. We've lived here for a while. We don't want all of that. And they just seem to go ahead and do it. They just seem to go ahead and approve it. And I don't know if this is the remedy, but some remedy needs to be put in place to control this local government here from just approving all of these housing developments, like out here on 210, where it's taken them 4 years and they still haven't widened this road section out here. They haven't completed it yet.
Mike, thank you for your comments. I want to ask you about that, Obi, but to his point, it does seem that if you're losing revenues, the only way for a county to make up for it might be additional growth.
Right. I think this is going to do the opposite of that. But also, you do have a remedy. You can elect people who are anti-growth. If you feel that your county is not doing what you feel comfortable with growth, then you can elect people who are anti-growth. I think that is the issue here is there are remedies to kind of fix tax issues if you feel that those are there, but that means you have to take your power as an elector and go out and make sure the candidates represent what you want.
Lord knows that's an ongoing battle in St.
Right.
Johns County.
For sure. We've got a call from Jason in San Marco. Good morning, Jason. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I believe, it is my opinion, that increasing the homestead exemption is a very valid idea, but it needs to be done gradually, maybe in $50,000 increments up to 150 or perhaps 200,000, but phased in gradually at the minimum over 10 years so that these municipalities can budget accordingly. The concept is good, but it needs to be done very slowly so that everyone can manage their budgets going forward. That's my opinion, and thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling in. We appreciate you. We talk about county consolidation, but one thing that could well happen, and we talk about these 8 local cities, Fernandina Beach, Orange Park, Green Cove Springs, St. Augustine Beach, and then the 3 beaches communities. Mm-hmm. All of them estimating somewhere in the range of 40 to 50% of their budget's gone if this happens. Mm-hmm. What would be the likelihood that we'd start to see those just be absorbed by their surrounding counties and say we can't afford to have our own property appraiser, tax collector, supervisor of elections, local police, and just, dissolve?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it's certainly not out of the question. I mean, you look at, again, talk about St. Johns County, you look at a town like Hastings where, back in, 2017, 2018, they dissolved the town and just became an unincorporated community within St. Johns County, where they basically looked around at each other and said, our tax revenue is not bringing in enough to give people the services that people want. Let's just become part of the county. Now, the question then becomes, to the talk of consolidating counties and such, does that then put an additional strain on county governments who are already going to be kind of trying to navigate this new thing? That's an excellent question, but I don't think it's out of the question.
Got a call from Adam in St. John's. Good morning, Adam. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, guys. I just wanted to state that I agree with the prior caller that I think it's a little too much too fast. I think, some bit of a delay would be very helpful. But I was also curious if any of the panelists had seen any research as far as what the impact of putting more money in people's pockets, would do to offset, the economy. If people have more money to spend, they can go out more, they can go and spend that money. So I'm just curious if it's a true dollar for dollar comparison as far as what we'll lose when this goes through, if it does.
It's a good point, Adam. Certainly tax cuts, that has always been the argument. Here's the money back in your pocket. You can go and, the economy will be stimulated.
Yeah, I mean, there's a multiplier effect of putting more money in people's pockets, but at the same time, you got to do the offset as well. What is the degradation in social service, not social service, but community services? I mean, there's a net here.
Yeah, it could seriously stimulate. Sorry,
go ahead.
It could seriously stimulate commercial development, which could boost that for a lot of counties. But what does that then mean for libraries?
Right.
But I think both of those last callers are kind of think about it the right way as far as maybe this is just too fast and too soon, right? I think there were other options that were put up for property tax kind of and none of those kind of happened. I think people are definitely struggling with kind of tariffs and gas prices right now, and so they are feeling that the need of somebody to give them some kind of resolution or some kind of help. And I just think that this is a little bit too much too soon, and I think these last two callers kind of hit it on the head about what happens if you do it this fast.
Mayor Donna Deegan has said that she plans to be at the forefront of this debate and, talking about the costs. She spoke to it this week. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Anytime you talk about a tax cut, it sounds great. But you have to read the fine print. This proposed reduction will inevitably result in roads deteriorating, libraries, pools, and parks closing, public safety response times going up, housing affordability worsening, and more homeless on our streets. Those are just the facts.
Jake, obviously there's people that will disagree with that and say that, as we've already heard from some city council members, the government needs additional forced restraints on its expenditures in order to stop spiraling expenses and just constantly adding programs. And clearly we're going to have a sort of Deegan versus Rory Diamond dynamic happening over
They love
this.
each other, too.
They're on very opposite sides of this, but that would be the pushback.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, Diamond, his basic proposal is cut all, non-governmental organization funding, cut all nonprofit funding, and stop all city incentives. That last one, I mean, you hear from people, why are we giving Winn-Dixie $50 million to stay in Jacksonville? Why are we, funding his stadium? Why are we giving developers all these millions and millions and millions of dollars to build things? I mean, it's kind of that growth or no growth thing. If you don't want to see cranes downtown, if you don't want to see new things popping up all over the place, well, you got to, provide some incentives, or at least that's kind of become the expectation, it seems, from developers. Hey, you want me to build downtown? Well, what are you going to do for me? And of course, that's all paid for with tax dollars. So, could you find the money by doing what Diamond says? It seemed like the mayor even to some degree kind of acknowledged, okay, sure. And then you have police fire and maybe your trash gets picked up. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the reasons why cities do it, because other cities are competing for these jobs and for these things here, right? I think you want to build the best city you can build, and you need to offer services, but you also want to offer jobs that people want to have, and high paying jobs, and that's a lot of times what these incentives are attached to. I do think though, I think there is a huge difference between a millage cut, right, and this type of budget adjustment here, that a third of your budget will affect all your core services. It will have to. And I think that is something that I think people don't understand now, but if that happens, they will be complaining to this mayor about not being able to get their trash picked up on time or whatever the issue is that day.
There have been some estimates. We know that Will Lannon for the city council brought some numbers to this week's meeting of finance, talking about if the city zeroed out every bit of its spending on nonprofits. So that includes, the Kids Hope Alliance, all of its youth services to reduce crime, all of its cultural events, all of its public service grants. So that's, any kind of charitable program, and even took out its safety net hospital, which is where, the indigent receive care,
Right.
presumably need care somewhere. The city, if it cut everything, all of those nonprofits would still have to make 22% across the board cuts in non-public safety departments.
Like I say, this is deja vu all over again. This is exactly the debate, the discussions we had in 2007, 2008.
But that happened and the city survived.
Well, you know what? We enacted the fees, so we had an alternative revenue source that we created, and that created all sorts of political drama. What I'm sensing this time around, though, is that this is just, we're going to do this. And like two callers said, Howard and the other caller, it said maybe it's too much too fast. There should be a phased in approach as to how are we going to fund this? This was not the radical transformation of taxation in the state of Florida that the governor was talking about. This is the same old hatchet plan.
Well, there is so much to continue talking about on this topic, and we've got a few months to do it. So we're going to move on now. I want to talk about another topic. This one exploding nationally, the question of data centers. We have seen some local efforts to kind of pause the construction of these data centers. Newsweek reporting this week that the attorney and activist Erin Brockovich has now started this sort of watchdog national map that helps people identify and report suspected data centers. And no, a lot of this is coming because people feel that they're being caught off guard, that they're hearing about projects when there's already incentives, when they've already been approved, and that all of a sudden their community is faced with a project that a lot of people see as having potentially detrimental impacts. So talk a little bit about what those impacts are, or that people's fears about them are, and what we're seeing in terms of engagement on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the biggest impacts that people are concerned about with the development of data centers, when we talk about data centers, we're talking about large-scale centers that are, server farms, more or less, that power core functions that people use on a day-to-day basis. Now, whether that's Google searching or whether that's generative AI crap, that's a totally different question. But I think a big concern that I hear from people is water usage and energy usage. I was reading an article in Wired from just a couple of days ago where they cited a Gallup poll that found that 7 out of 10 Americans of the people that they surveyed oppose the development of data centers in their community, and specifically cited water usage as a big concern. And now, there's been some pushback. There was some discussion about this at the St. Johns County Commission last month, where a couple commissioners pushed for trying to get ahead of this and say, let's go on ahead and say that we don't want data centers in our community. And there was pushback from at least one of the other county commissioners who said, we don't know everything about this. And then a couple weeks later, County Commissioner Christian Whitehurst came back and said, well, I saw a presentation and I was able to see something that said that there are data centers that don't use water now, that use pumps and use other electrically powered things. And then the question then becomes, how do they power those things? And it's massive amounts of electricity. So no matter which way you look at it, these would be a large strain or addition to systems in these areas that are potentially already strained.
So, Obi, this initial map that was created by the Brockovich website says that there's 33 of these centers that are operational, 53 under construction, 34 proposed, and over 3,600 that are cited as concerns because there's sort of been chatter about them in the local community. There's been a sense that there's something happening politically on those fronts. And, the cost of energy, water use, all of that. But there's also these other somewhat less tangible issues like the hum that they generate.
Noise, and there's also light pollution I've seen as well. I mean, I think this is one of these issues where it's about transparency, right? I think there was a time in the city where they used to dump in the river. They used to dump all types of things into the river. And when we realized what happened to the river, we made them clean it up. And I think this is a similar type industry. If they want to build these data centers, they need to do their part. They need to make sure that they're not harming the community. Then they need to make sure that they're paying their fair share. Otherwise, they don't need to be here. And I think what we're seeing here is closed room doors and behind the things that are happening and incentives happening before people in the neighborhood could even figure out what's going on.
Yeah, so there's this project that's over near Hernando and or in Fort Meade, and excuse me, I'm sorry, it's in Lakeland. That people, when they learned about it, it was dubbed Project Swan, which doesn't really give you a lot of indicators.
Sure. Yeah.
They tried to pass some measures, Jake, that would have required additional transparency through the legislature when these are coming, but ultimately that kind of got voted down. So there still is this year-long grace period where a data center can be meeting with local officials, talking about plans, and it doesn't have to be disclosed.
Yeah, they're local officials and employees are allowed to enter into non-disclosure agreements with prospective data center builders on projects, and I mean that's not out of the norm necessarily. I mean, really, any big development or proposed project, I mean, typically you will see these NDAs used. So it's not unique to data centers, but obviously there's the heightened concern about data centers. Now, that bill that you mentioned also does include some ratepayer protections to try and ensure that, if there's an additional strain on the grid, that any increased cost would be absorbed by those centers and not by, ratepayers. But I don't even think that those protections necessarily went as far as the governor had initially called for. There's a lot of people lobbying on the data centers. It's obviously a pretty big topic over on the GOP side of the gubernatorial race as well.
Interesting. Well, that'll be something to watch. Jack, I want to move on now to a topic that is not just something you're going to be commenting on, but actually something that you're involved in. You're an attorney, obviously, and you're representing a client in this next story. So I do want to start with you. This is the story out of St. Johns County. It kind of started with local reporting here and then has spiraled into, coverage by the New York Post. This has been picked up by People magazine. This is this principal in St. Johns County who was removed over a rap lyric that appeared in the Trout Creek School's yearbook.
Yeah, it was Trout Creek Academy. Katie O'Connell is my client, and I did clear with her today. I told her, listen, I'm going to be on Ann's show. You got a problem with me talking about this? She said no. In fact, she offered to come on the show next week. If you're interested, we'll talk about that. But that said, yeah, it's a mess. We're trying to dig through the impact on Katie, number one, but resulting from the just glaring absence of due process protection afforded to her.
Well, tell us what happened.
Well, they were working on the yearbook. Okay, she's the principal. They have a yearbook class. Okay, it's like 10 students, 12 students in the class, 7th to 8th graders who prepare the yearbook. It's assigned to an art teacher. Art teacher is she's like the liaison. She's the lead person. All right, so they finish up. They finalize the yearbook. Okay, it comes to Katie for final approval. Got it. Good. Go. No rap lyric, no page, nothing attributed to Miss O'Connell. Okay. It goes out for print. It comes back. Now, Katie is not around. Well, first of all, she didn't need to be because she had already approved it, okay? But it turns out that after she approved, it was accessed again, and this page was included with the rap lyric from Fetty Wap. There was no attribution to Fetty Wap. In fact, it was attributed to Mrs. O'Connell, and she doesn't go by Mrs. O'Connell.
What was the lyric?
Everybody hating, we just call them fans. All right. Now, if you listen to any Fetty Wap, and we were talking about, Obi and I were talking about this. This is probably one of the least objectionable lyrics he's ever written. But in any event, it's in the book. All right. Now, what had happened as well was that the book, the yearbook, was not distributed properly. It was not supposed to go out until like 48 hours later. However, it got distributed to a number of people. Okay, so that said, that night, a Facebook or a social media post hits from a parent, not from a parent, but from a resident who I believe who did not have any children in the school. All right, but bottom line is it blew up. She gets called in. She is suspended pending investigation. The next day, They bring in other people. They bring in the art teacher who had previously stated Katie had nothing to do with it. She flipped on her story. Bottom line is, and the day after, they walked it back. They said, we are administratively suspending you, and pending the
But they've
conclusion.
said to her, it's because of this lyric.
Yes.
And she says, that's not even my name.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So I didn't do it. I didn't put it in there. But now they're saying, all right, well, we're just going to not renew your contract. I'm like, so my position is, wait a minute, guys. No. You have to give her that hearing. And they refuse. The school board refuses to do it. So that's where we're at.
Obi, what is offensive about this this lyric?
Yeah, I had a lot of Fetty Wap lines prepared for the show, and my wife told me I was not allowed to use them. But I think what they're saying is that it was possibly mean to some of the parents that had been complaining about some things that are happening at the school. I'll be quite honest. It just feels like an overcorrection or unnecessary punishment for something that is, even if she did do this, like, doesn't seem like it's warranted this level of response. But I think it is interesting that it just feels like something else is going on because of the level of overcorrection here. You know.
No, this is a county that has a little bit of a rep when it comes to yearbook issues. You'll remember a few years ago when I think it was Bartram Trail covered up all of the cleavage of the girls in the yearbooks, even if they weren't. We're showing a picture of it right now. You can see kind of inoffensive photos, but they created these, I guess, sort of AI, pre-AI, perhaps, Photoshop images where they covered up the girls' chests.
I think there is definitely
83 photos.
Yes. There is definitely a sense that we were talking about this a bit before the show. St. Johns County, especially the school district, definitely does not want to be the center of controversy. And yet, but I have definitely seen other cases where they will do their best to get ahead of something, whether there could be more going on behind the scenes or whether there is a potential for something to blow up. I have definitely seen cases where the school district will try to kind of throw themselves in front of it to kind of prevent it from becoming a bigger deal. I think in this case that might have backfired a little bit because now this is, like you said, getting national attention. By
dismissing her, you mean throw themselves in front of it?
Yes. But I do, to Obi's point, I do truly wonder, and I've got some public records requests out about this, I wonder whether there were maybe existing concerns or existing issues with this teacher that might have led to this kind of thing.
Can I speak to that real quick?
5 seconds.
Okay. No.
Okay. Well, we're going to continue to follow it. I appreciate all of you being here today. Jake.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Even when we drive defensively, accidents can still happen. Do you know what to do next? There's more to it than you might think.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com.
Many people hear palliative care and think the worst. Why that misunderstanding can prevent patients from getting the support they need most. On the next What's Health Got to Do with It?
On the next Florida Roundup, who's hiring? It's cap and gown season. A fresh class of hopefuls are starting their careers, or hope to. They're entering an increasingly tight and competitive job market. Florida's unemployment rate has been steadily rising over the past year and is higher than the national jobless rate. Are you looking for work? What's the job hunt like today? We want to hear from you. Email us, radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then be sure to join us Friday, noon until 1.
On the next Fresh Air, the Tony Awards are this Sunday. We'll feature interviews with 2 award winners from our archive. Alan Cumming, who played the MC in Cabaret in 3 different productions, and Angela Lansbury, who starred in Stephen Sondheim's Sweeney Todd as Mrs. Lovett, who baked Sweeney's victims into pies. Join us.
Today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
More Republicans break with their party in a call to end the Iran war. On the next Friday News Roundup, is the tide shifting in Washington on Iran 3 months in? The anti-weaponization fund is halted after outrage from both parties, plus big winners and losers from Tuesday's primaries. We round up the week's biggest stories next time on 1A.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. An I Love Lucy parody puts the iconic TV characters at the center of an interactive murder mystery. Here to tell us about Trouble at the Tropicabana is the show's director, David Wittenbach. David, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
We're also joined by the actor playing Lucy, also connected to David, Vicki Wittenbach. Good morning, Vicki.
Hi, good morning.
And we're joined by Deborah Cottle. She performs as Ethel and actually owns the venue where this is being performed. Deborah, good morning.
Good morning.
And we're owned by our own WJCT Executive Assistant and Corporate Secretary, Carlos Semide, who plays Ricky. Good morning, Carlos.
How did you guess?
Well, it was the maracas and the Congo and the tuxedo.
The bow tie throws it.
Yeah.
I didn't have to explain it.
No, you didn't. But you did a great, all of you, we should say, if you're not watching our live stream, are here in costume. And you couldn't miss Lucy for the polka dots and the apron and the bright red hair and lipstick.
Of course.
Let's just start off, David. This is a show that's iconic, many legions and generations of fans. What made you want to do this program? Did you have any reservations about taking on such an iconic cast of characters?
No, not at all. So the thing with I Love Lucy is it's just so well known. Often in the little theater world, we're doing shows that people may not be familiar with. But when you throw out the name I Love Lucy, everyone just resonates and connects to it immediately. It almost sells itself, the tickets, because everyone knows what they expect and what they're going to get. And then putting together the cast, you're just looking for the antics and the chemistry and the funny people. There's lots of people out there like that, and I've got them all in this cast right now.
Yeah, and so we don't have Fred here today, but certainly the relationship between Lucy and Ethel is one of the core relationships.
You know, this this is something that we're taking on. That is such an iconic TV show and characters that everyone knows. And so it's a lot for us to try to recreate. Now, I like to say that we are channeling Lucy, Ethel, Ricky, and Fred. We're not impersonators. We're channeling them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just been so fun to dive into those characters and try to be as funny as they were.
Yeah.
Except for Fred, though. I think Travis really is Fred.
I think he is.
He's active duty. I wish he could be here, but
yeah.
he's the perfect wingman. So anyway.
He totally is, yeah.
Carlos, what is fun about playing this character? Ricky, of course, is one of the a special place in many people's hearts as a performer, as a comic, and as a sort of straight man foil to his wife's antics.
So many things. I always admired his wardrobe. I love the things he wore, and just the fact that he was also technically very savvy. You know, Desi Arnaz came up with the idea of 3 cameras in a studio so that you get those different perspectives, and then his production company grew and grew, and brought out the Dick Van Dyke Show and Make Room for Daddy, and all kinds of programs that just blossomed out of his ideas. And that collaboration with him and his wife.
Yeah.
So I was really excited about that. Also getting to play, I have a Congo drum with me, and I've got my maracas.
Shake them.
Everyone's. That's the best offer I've had all day. And
if I may jump in, we often do auditions for shows, but I've worked with Carlos before in the past, and this was a case of, I know the man who's going to do a fantastic job.
Yeah, well, we should say this is at the St. Mary's Little Theater. it is a production of, but it is, Deborah, going to be at a venue, as we said, that you own. Tell us about the venue, and it feels like you're really taking on double duty by starring in the production and then also hosting it because it's a dinner theater show.
It is. We opened Coddle and Gun in 2014 up in St. Mary's, and in 2024 we opened a small cafe inside. It's a vintage shop, but we also have the cafe. And fast forward to last Christmas time-ish, the St. Mary's Little Theater lost their theater, and I had a stage, and so I kind of said, hey, what do y'all think about doing dinner theater? And that's how it became, a reality. And I will say that I have never been on the stage before, except the chorus line, 20 years ago when I was in high school, or 40. And so this is a great experience for me, and it's given me a whole new respect for community theater because we did this in 3 weeks. I mean, start to finish.
Wow.
And we do 2 shows, and it's done, and it's
And we're
it's
off
been
to the next one.
fantastic. And we do the next one. So.
And this is a kind of a Cuban-inspired meal, sort of in keeping with the theme. Of...
So my staff does an incredible job. We get the script ahead of time, and then we read the script, and then we design the meal around the script. So each meal that we've done has been a different meal, and we pull the inspiration from the script. And then my girls in the kitchen and my staff do an amazing job coming up with the menu. So it's always different.
And Lucy, just briefly, this is a show that also invites some audience participation.
Absolutely. If you come to the show, you're going to expect to, be in a conga. As Desi Arnaz was, Desi was well known for coming up with the concept of conga, and so you might be asked to get up and dance a little bit. There will be music in the show. Carlos has got some great tunes, some of Desi's favorites, and so just come to be prepared to laugh.
Yeah, and also, I mean, there's a murder mystery at the heart of it, so something to solve.
Ooh. Well, we kind of we do have a mystery. We kind of took out the murder.
Okay, a murderless
it
mystery.
It was originally a murder, but we thought, would Ethel and Lucy
Of
or
course
Ricky,
we wouldn't.
Would we kill him? Oh no.
Well, it's called Trouble at the Tropicabana. It's at the cafe at the Coddle and Gun shop in St. Mary's, Georgia. We got a link on our website. It's June 6th. There's 2 shows. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
And please join us Monday when we sit down with incoming City Council President Nick Howland to discuss his leadership priorities and what could be one of the most difficult budgets in city history. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.